we do expect and want lots of load growth if we're going to make progress with the energy transition. So I guess the over forecasting in the near term is mostly problematic because of this sort of panic mentality and the extra legal or extra procedural consideration of gas plants that lead to bad decisions. But the thing that we need to be disciplined about meeting load growth is using the assets we have more efficiently and then making intentional decisions about the kind of service utilities can and should provide the large loads to preserve the public interest. So I'm not as concerned about high load forecasts in the long run, but when it leads to bad decision making and it leads to kind of capital expenditures not getting the scrutiny that they're deserved, that's really the problem here.
Yeah, exactly. We need to be able to distinguish what's real and what's fantasy. And the way this whole process is constructed and the way that some of these regulators operate is not conducive to that. Well, your team at Energy Innovation has done some very thorough work on the 45V tax credits for green hydrogen production, as we discussed recently with your colleague Eric Gimon in episode 224. Since those rules have not yet been finalized, and therefore the final investment decisions for electrolyzers that will impose some extremely large grid power demands on the grid have not yet been made, how much credence should we give to the anticipated demand that hydrogen producers will place on local grids? For example, in the Grid Strategies report, the NISO planning area said that it has received 890 megawatts of load requests from several data centers and 2 hydrogen plants with proposed in-service dates prior to 2026. But how solid of a commitment is a load request? Put another way, if some of these prospective hydrogen producers are actually venue shopping, as has been widely speculated, that is, if they're putting in these load requests in multiple areas to see where they can get the best deal, then there's a very decent chance that some of this anticipated load is actually being double counted or more. But none of these load forecasts even seem to be attempting to take that into account.
Yeah, that's right. You have to take a look at the degree of financial commitment that's associated with any load request. And I think it's likely that there is venue shopping going on, as well as kind of similar to the interconnection queue on the generation side, just making sure you get your request in so that if you are ready to invest, you have a place in line, your claim or your request is getting considered in a timely fashion, and you're kind of ready to go when your equipment is ready or when you want to kind of start producing hydrogen in this case. So until you see the hydrogen producers have some kind of offtake agreement with a customer for that hydrogen, I would be pretty skeptical that they are definitely going to connect to the grid. In fact, I would be extremely skeptical of any hydrogen production that's proposed and asking for a grid connection until we see what the accounting rules are for clean hydrogen under the 45V rules. So people can definitely tune into your episode and interview with Eric to understand this. I won't belabor the point, but essentially the viability of grid-connected projects depends a lot on whether hydrogen can simply buy annual clean energy offsets via financial mechanisms or has to account for their emissions on an hourly and incremental basis. So in other words, did they have to buy clean energy that actually offsets their consumption so that the subsidy they're receiving for being carbon-free is being administered accurately? That really will determine whether a hydrogen electrolyzer can pull from the grid directly or whether they have to have incentives to pair with directly on-site wind and solar projects. So we think in the long run, and probably even in the short run, especially if the 45V rules come out the way that we're hoping, that hydrogen will be mostly off-grid or at least paired with hybrid renewable projects on site. And we're also quite skeptical about hydrogen penciling in all the broad use cases that people seem to think it's sort of energy carrier Swiss Army knife. That's not really the future that we see for hydrogen. It has a significant role in decarbonization, but much, much smaller than a lot of optimists think. But you won't be surprised to hear, Chris, that many of the same utilities that are raising reliability issues related to load growth are the same ones that are lobbying the Treasury Department through their trade associations for lax 45V accounting rules so that hydrogen can qualify for the tax credit by pairing with baseload nuclear and hydro.
Yep.
And by sucking clean power from the grid during peak, this would exacerbate the demand issue they're supposedly panicking about. So it's actually it's like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or the hands know exactly what they're doing, and the end is that utilities get to rate-based loss of capital expenditures. I mean, it's not a good look for the utility industry to be saying both of these things at the same time.